What is something a high school teacher told you that you will never forget? We're all trying to figure it out. At any age. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I had a gym teacher that was known for being strict/rude. He actively would make kids cry on the regular. Anyway, after my dad passed away he was still super strict towards me. But one day after track practice he caught me in the hall and said, "Your dad would be so proud of you." It caught me so off guard. I actually cried. Best history teacher I ever had was a substitute. Final day of his weeks-long run. I told him as much and asked him why he didn't do it full time. He said he'd like to, but he doesn't coach any sports. All the coaches are history teachers because they can get away with spitting out names and dates and descriptions, and that counts. His style was more cause and effect, and while more engaging, it wasn't deemed necessary by the school board. I said you should move to a better area. He said no. He liked it here because it's where he grew up and where he'd die. He confided in me that he had a terminal disease. Died the next year. Was in the 90s. My political thought teacher never document your deviance. My music teacher used to tell me that before you could break the rules, you had to understand them. A teacher of mine said he would write me a letter of recommendation, but it had been a week or so and he hadn't gotten back to me yet. I went in a third time to remind him and I started off with an apology, to which he corrected me, saying don't ever stop advocating for yourself. It's advice I haven't forgotten since. My chemistry teacher told my mom that I would do so much better if I asked questions. I found that this is true in all stages of life. Ask questions. My partner had a high school teacher that would walk through the busy hallways at school shouting hot coffee while holding an empty mug. He just wanted people to get out of his way and it always worked. Coming up to our final year 12th exams, my maths teacher handed out an article on the most common things people said on their deathbed. She said no one wished they had worked longer hours, that they had spent more time at work than with their loved ones. If we didn't get the grades we wanted, that's okay, because there'll be a back doors to where we wanted to go. Failure is okay, it's only a minor setback. What's important is having a good balance between work/studies, family/friends and our own hobbies/interest. Leave your verbal guns at the door. This was the HS football coach's first words teaching sex ed at my high school. He used the metaphor of the old American West, where cowboys would leave their guns at the door when they entered a saloon to drink so nobody would get killed in a drunken outburst. He said we'd talk about a lot of topics that might make us feel uncomfortable and tempted to make a joke at someone else's expense to break the tension. He asked us to leave our verbal guns at the door so everyone could feel comfortable asking honest questions. This was back in the late 80s. He was way ahead of his time. My high school biology teacher, on the end of every quiz or exam, would put a giveaway point question. The question was always the same. Science is exciting. B interesting. C a challenge. D all of the above. No matter which you marked you got the point. However, since this was on every exam, the saying was sandblasted into my long-term memory. This led to me always somehow muttering this whenever I was taking an exam in university, substituting the word science with whatever necessary. Then it led to me muttering it whenever I was dealing with something stressful. Now it has become a fallback whenever I run into a life roadblock and everything is simply designated or exciting. B interesting. C a challenge. D all of the above. It's simple but it helps keep me from being too negative. That nobody really cares. And that's a good thing. He was a very interesting drama teacher, subbing for the regular teacher for her maternity leave. He was directing a play that he wrote that a few of us were in. In high school most people are terribly self-conscious and afraid of judgment. Be a good person, but go and make mistakes. Be silly. Live your life. And own it. In the end most people won't remember if you looked stupid for 5 minutes by teaching us that most things you do are trivial and inconsequential. He coaxed us out of our shells and got us to really act. But it left a big impression on me for my day-to-day life too. Not as inspiring as the others, but I always found it funny how my teacher would say 90 degrees instead of sit up straight. My favorite math teacher had a philosophy about us understanding how to get to formulas instead of memorizing them. Basically, if we memorize them, we were gonna remember them wrong and would never be the wiser because we thought we remembered it. 2005, a teacher said intelligence of the future will not be defined by how well you know one skill, but instead how well you can find information and decipher what information is good and bad. Pay attention to what you pay attention to. My high school baseball coach / sociology teacher always used to say those who are prepared create their own luck before exams. This is a true life lesson. That I wasn't stupid, just lazy, changed my life. That our town was a shithole and the best advice he could give us was to move out and live elsewhere. Decades later, he was correct. On 9/11, while classes were all but cancelled, most teachers just rolled in TVs and left the news on. Not Jamar. He got up and lectured. To the groans of students. He talked about the effects this would have on the economy, our politics, our culture and society. And he was right. In somewhat broad strokes. Of course. But this was literally hours after the towers collapsed. When so much was still unknown. Frightening and tragic. It really gave me what I would consider a solid base of understanding the things that would come in the next decade. He talked about how traveling would change with restrictive security measures. How politics would take advantage of terrorism. How the wars we will engage will be paid for by my generation. My kids' generation and so on. He talked about how racism will spike toward Middle Eastern peoples out of anger and fear, and how that is totally wrong. As a vet and former cop, he cautioned us to not join the military while emotions ran high and a sense of patriotism was thick in our veins. It was a gift. As the years went on, WMDs, the Iraq War, WhatsApp, Department of Homeland Security all came about. I felt like I already knew. I will never forget that fourth period class